Welcome to another edition of the Andy Bashir Podcast. Remember, you can download us on all major platforms, but please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Andy Bashir Podcast. We have an incredible episode this week. We have Maryland Senator Angela Alsobrooks, and she is going to talk about everything from her childhood, which continues to compel her to do what's right today, to her faith. She's going to talk about how proud she is of her daughter and her family. She's going to teach us a little bit about grilling, but then she's going to talk about how she was an effective prosecutor, executive of one of the largest or most populated counties in the country, as well as her new job as a U.S. Senator. You're going to enjoy this. Then we're going to have our conversation among friends, meaning our conversation with the Johns. Then you're going to hear my Kentucky accent, where I talk about ending anger politics and the importance of doing it in our time and not leaving this craziness to our kids or to our grandkids. We've got another segment of Ask Andy, so all together, this is going to be a fun one. Let's get it started. You're listening to the Andy Bashir Podcast. Today, we have got a great guest, Maryland Senator Angela Alsobrooks. She is a new senator, but has a lifetime of service from a prosecutor focusing on domestic violence, showing that you can be tough on crime while still trying to give people second chances. She's been an executive for one of the largest counties in Maryland and is now fighting the good fight in the Senate, so a lot to talk about. Senator, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have the conversation today, so thank you.
Well, I'm thrilled. There's a lot I want to talk about because I think we've had some similar experiences, but your background is pretty unique. Your story of what brought you to Maryland, can you share it with our listeners?
You know, first of all, I do think we've had a lot of similar experiences, and even my family's origin story. I think when I talk to people, I find there are so many who've had a similar story in that my family is not originally from the state of Maryland. In fact, we came from a place called Seneca, South Carolina. At least my mother's family did. Both of my parents are native Southerners. And in 1956, my family was living in Seneca, South Carolina, when my great-grandfather, whose name was J.C. James, who was an epileptic, was accused of being drunk. And it turns out that he had had a seizure and he wasn't drunk. Well, there was a man who stood up for him. This man happened to be a white man. And that so embarrassed the sheriff's deputy who had accused him of being drunk that he vowed revenge, told my great-grandfather, you know what, I'm going to come back and get you. And on July 4th, 1956, that's exactly what he did. That sheriff's deputy saw him walking along the road, came to him for shooting at his feet, telling him to dance, and then shot him in his abdomen, and he died. He was there on the side of the road. My family went to the courthouse about a week later, and we've heard this happen so often before. It was determined that no crime was committed. And in fact, the family was told that if they didn't leave, they'd kill the whole family. So within about a week's time, my mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and a number of other family members fled north, and they settled in a place called Fairmont Heights, which is here in Prince George's County, Maryland. And that's how my family came to Maryland. Now, what was significant is that I come from a family of very deep faith. And my great-grandmother, whose husband had been killed, her name was Maybelle James. And I was very close to her. She had been born in 1897. And believe it or not, she lived until I was a first-year law student. But it was Maybelle who would often recount that story, not with bitterness, but what she would say is, you know, you don't have a right, essentially, to complain about things you don't like. And she, in her Southern way, would say, well, if you don't like it, maybe you should go further and do better. And that is a lesson that I have internalized. I think it is one that has really carried me through my life, is just seeking to find solutions and healing for the pain and suffering that we have seen so many endure. And it is the case that we don't have a right to sit on the sidelines as onlookers, but to try to jump in and heal it. So I think Maybelle would be quite proud. She might almost be a little surprised. I was described as a child as being what they call active. And everybody knows what that means, right? Is I was a little bit of the wild one. So she would often say, you must obey your parents. I have, in fact, I have a wonderful relationship with them, but the whole active child, I'm not sure that she would see all of this happening, but I know she would be quite proud of how the years have evolved.
One of the rules that we have on this podcast that I think you just more than satisfied is about telling your why. Especially people in our position, and I'd say Democrats in our position, are really good at the what, what our policy is, but less often share the why that drives us to do what we do. So I know your family history was a big driver. Tell us a little bit about your faith. I mean, that's my driver, that golden rule and parable of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, it's what drives me as well, is my faith undergirds almost everything that I do. As I mentioned, I was raised in a deeply spiritual family, and I was taught so early on that I had an obligation to care about the lives and livelihood of other people. And I have to tell you, I have been so blessed and so lucky along the way that I've been able to live out in a lot of ways my faith in terms of finding ways to give back, both as I started as a domestic violence prosecutor. And that gave me the chance to not just say I cared about those who were suffering or cared about families, but to really jump in. So my faith instructs me to not only care for people, but the Bible says that by this they will know that you are my disciples, and that is if you love people. And one of the really powerful principles I believe of my faith is love, and that you should feel it everywhere you go, that we are here to heal. And there's a concept in the Bible that talks about salt and light, and it talks about salt as a curative. It's a thing that heals, that keeps down the temperature, that essentially is restorative. And then there's the light that we hope that people who interface with us, interface, those who agree with us and those who do not, I believe still ought to see something in you that is attractive. That's the love in us that says, you know what, like my dad says, how you see something often depends on where you sit. So it means that we don't agree with everything, but the people who interface with you should still feel love. And I have tried to do that, and I have been, again, more than blessed to have a career in public service over 28 years now, that I have had opportunities to provide health care for people who need it, built a cancer center, I've built schools, I've created programs for those who were suffering from addiction. I have, built housing. It's just been amazing. And I'm lucky that I'm not done yet, that I still have the opportunity to do what I think every family wants, which is to have the true and growing opportunity to live their best lives, to live the American dream. And, it's been really fun as well.
I want to talk both about your faith and how it drove you as a prosecutor, as well as getting results for your county that you led, because I think both are critically important for people to see and hear, especially from Democrats right now, and re-earning the faith of the American people. So when I was Attorney General, I believed in my core that we could stand up for victims. I created our first Survivors Council that gave us feedback, making sure that we were doing things in a victim-oriented or first, survivor-first way, but also to believe in the power of second chances, the idea of what you do to the least of thee, you do to me, and it's our job to stand up for them, especially when they've been victims of violent crime. But that idea that we can reduce recidivism on the other side, and that makes everyone safer.
I agree. You know what? So as a prosecutor, and again, I started in 1997, and by the time I ended my career, especially I was the elected prosecutor for 8 years as well, we actually cut violent crime by 50% during that time. Now, I believe that there are two concepts, and Andy, I think you probably believe this too, and it's that every single person, first of all, deserves to not only be safe, but to feel safe in the places in which they live.
Yes.
And I believe that there should be no contradiction. There is no, in other words, no struggle between freedom and justice, that you have to have both, and that we deserve both, meaning that justice dictates that we should have a system that is fair, where people have a realistic expectation that they can be treated fairly, that they will be policed with dignity. But we also have a system that promises us we should have freedom, Shouldn't you be able to walk the streets without fear of crime? Sit on your front porch in the evenings like my grandparents did, or go out to shop without being afraid that you'll be carjacked or robbed. And so justice and freedom are not contradictory concepts. It's like you cannot have a progressive community unless you have both. And so it really does bother me at times that we place the burden on victims and we say somehow poor people, for example, should have a higher tolerance for crime and violence. And I would submit the opposite is true. That people who, no matter where you live, whether you're poor, whether you're wealthy, that we all want the same things and we deserve it too. Is that you should live in a place where you are not only safe, but that you should feel safe. And that's what my aim was, both as a prosecutor, and it was also that as a county executive. Now, you mentioned another concept about second chances. And you know what I discovered as a prosecutor is that many of the people who were in my courtrooms seeking second chances, in my estimation, had never had the first chance. And by that, I mean, what happens when you are stuck in a place where you have inadequate education? What happens when you don't have access to growing economic opportunity or realistic opportunities, where you don't have housing that is safe and affordable? So those are the things I've also worked, or healthcare, mental health care, addictions care. What happens when you don't have those things? And so I've also worked to really provide those kinds of resources for people who I know want the first chance, not just the second chance. They want us to get it right in the first place.
You're listening to the Andy Beshear Podcast. We're talking to the great senator from the state of Maryland. We've talked a little bit about your time as a prosecutor. We've talked a little bit about you leading a county. You ran for U.S. Senate, and you ran an impressive race. I think you got outspent 10-1, and here you are on the Senate floor fighting for what you think is right. Tell us a little bit about that election and that journey.
Well, you started this conversation talking about faith, and oh my goodness, this was a race that required a lot of faith. To get into a race where my opponent spent close to $70 million of his own money. And obviously, maybe no surprise to some people that turns out I'm not a billionaire, but I was running against one.
Yeah, me neither.
Oh my goodness. And that was in the primary. We were double digits behind for most of that race and worked really hard to get out ahead and to make sure that people knew who I was, to talk about the values that I know we all share, the vision we had. And we won that race, I think, to almost everyone's surprise. We were down really to about double digits, maybe 6 weeks before the primary, and we won by double digits. And then entered the general election with one of the most popular Republican governors the state has had, who left the office with over 70% approval rating. And so ran in a race against him. And also we started out, down in that race and won that one by double digits as well. So, the general message was one I think continues to resonate. And it is that every person wants economic opportunity. They want to know that at their kitchen tables, that their children will have the single best education we can afford, that their children, like my parents who married at 21 and 22, I should tell the family secret that my mother's the cougar in the relationship. They've been married 56 years. She's the cougar. But, about 5 years into their marriage, they could buy a modest home. That,
Yes.
for many families, is no longer the expectation. So our families want to be able to afford housing. I know that everyone believes that when you're sick or someone you love is sick, they deserve to have health care. My parents who are aging, my dad is my mother's caregiver. So Medicare is a lifeline for so many families, as is Medicaid for those who, but for the grace of God, how do we know whether we'll need to go into a nursing home? So those are really kind of basics that I discussed on that campaign trail. And you know what? We were so blessed that we won that race. And you're right. I'm on the Senate floor. I'm fighting like everything, still for economic opportunity, for people's rights, but recognizing that you can't do it alone. So I've worked with others across the aisle, and we've been, fortunate. I've already been able to be original co-sponsors in 2 bills that have not only passed, but have been signed by the president into law.
I love in your answer how you talk about faith, patriotism, and the American dream, because those are not partisan. And I think
Yep.
we as Democrats need to make sure that we're talking in those terms, because tariffs are making the American dream harder. And certainly those are coming directly from the president. But I want to ask you about what I think is the single worst piece of legislation in my lifetime. I'm going to call it the big ugly bill, because in my state, it's going to kick 200,000 people off their health care coverage. It's going to fire 20,000 health care workers. It might close 35 rural hospitals, and it's going to make more seniors and more kids go to bed hungry each and every night.
And you know what, Andy, you started this by talking about faith again. Ask yourself, how could you go
Oh,
to sleep at night if you thought that it was possible?
the
For
miracle of the
17
fishes and the loaves is in every book of the gospel.
Oh, it is. And how could you, if you believe that 17 million people, humans, these are not numbers, would lose their health care, how could you sleep if you felt that you were somehow responsible for that? The 40% of our children who are on Medicaid, that's what the ugly bill does, is it cuts health care from children and from seniors. It cuts nutritional programs from seniors and children and others who need it. It cuts so much of what every community needs. It impacts housing and other things. It is a big ugly bill, but mostly the health care, the nutrition. It's really unconscionable legislation, and it is shameful.
And how can your Republican colleagues, and I hate to use that word when they're voting for something like this, vote for it knowing what it's going to do simply because they want the president to smile at them, that they would kick that many people off health care coverage. They would fire that many people. The healthcare industry is one of the fastest growing parts of our economy, and they're about to take a hatchet to it.
Well, you know what? I think that there are a good number of my colleagues who do not agree with this bill. I have met many of them. I have had conversations with them, and these are people who I believe care about their constituents as much as I care about mine. I think some of them are really afraid of the president. I think he has his tactics have been ones to bully others. I've heard that some have been threatened. And so I think that there are people who are afraid to stand up to the president. But I have to believe that they care about their constituents like I care about mine, but have made decisions because they have been, intimidated by this president who is a huge bully. So it's a shame. We are starting to see some who are standing in public who are actually speaking out against the president, who are voting against him. We've seen a few of my colleagues, and we're hoping that we will have more who will soon have the courage to vote against this administration, who recognize, like I do, our country will be unrecognizable because the veterans have suffered, because our children have suffered, because seniors have suffered, because we are this huge shift in resources away from middle class and working class people to benefit billionaires. And that's what all of this is about billionaires who want tax cuts. Can you believe how shameful that is and what it will do to our country? And not only that, but what? People all around the world are watching what is happening here. And we are not only going to harm those, many of whom, by the way, voted for this president. So don't that, we have to level set and be clear that these cuts hurt people, whether they live in red states or blue
That's
states,
right.
those who voted for the president and those who did not vote at all. But it is also the case that the country that stands, up in the world and says that we care about human rights and freedom, well, people are watching to see whether our rhetoric matches our actions. And I think that in some cases, they're going to find that it does not.
I think this bill is a direct attack on rural America, that it's going to hit our rural areas harder than our urban, that it's basically taking money from rural America because most of these billionaires live in urban America. And I appreciate, because you've got both, you standing up for people regardless of how they voted, just knowing that this bill was bad. But you know what? I think that's your job. And I'm really grateful you're doing your job. But I struggle with some of your Republican colleagues who aren't doing their job simply because they might lose it, when that's the whole point of it, is standing up, especially when it's hard.
That's absolutely right. And you know what, to your point, Maryland is no different than the rest of the country. We find that the parts of the state where we have the largest concentration of Medicaid patients, where we have also the largest concentration of individuals who rely on SNAP benefits, are the red parts of the state. So to your point, this hurts all of us.
Hmm.
So it is really, really important. And it would behoove my colleagues to stand up against this because we're going to see, I cannot even imagine what will happen in the next several months when people begin to understand that their health care has been cut or has become more expensive. And don't forget that we've also fired tens of thousands of patriots who worked in the federal government for many years, who didn't care whether the president was a Democrat or Republican. They are there to serve the American people. And by the way, only 20% of that federal workforce lives in the Washington, D.C. area. The rest are across the country, who also have lost their livelihoods. And so the suffering when they cannot afford their rent soon, those who will be trying to afford their utilities or their, the other costs that they have, the groceries, these are people who are going to be hurting soon. And they are not just constituents of Democratic lawmakers, but they are all of our constituents. Republicans, the ones who live in red, who voted red, who didn't vote red. These are humans. And I think that's what's really important is we have lost sight of that. These are people. I hear the people say these are people who don't deserve essentially these benefits. Well, who doesn't deserve health care? Just tell me, point to a person who you point out there and say that person, when they become diagnosed with cancer, maybe they don't deserve health care. Point out the person who doesn't deserve health care. It'd be a shame to have anyone be able to say that because it's not true. Everyone deserves health care.
Jesus says a doctor is for the sick, yet the sick aren't going to be able to see that doctor. And to your point, look at that town in West Virginia where so many of the folks that were working great jobs and the dollars were going through the economy work for the federal government. And what's about to happen to rural health care is that times 10 just all across the country. But let's talk about something a little happier.
Yes.
I know you are very close with your governor and my friend Wes Moore. I know you've supported him and he's supported you. Tell us what it's like having a good working relationship between a U.S. senator and a governor. I'm able to work with mine sometime, but I know you all are able to get a lot done.
You know what? It does make a big difference to be able to have a really productive relationship with our governor, and that we absolutely do. We share an interest in the people that we serve. The governor and I and his wife, he's a wonderful family, but I think we see a lot of it the same way. We really do. We believe that economic opportunity is the desire of every person, and we're determined to make sure that we can provide that. But it is so great, you're right, to have a person that we listen to each other, we respect each other, and what have created an environment here, where we are, and this is important to me, is that we should all be able to find common ground, to work together. And again, remembering, my father said, how you see it depends on where you sit. So it means that we don't require each other to agree on every single issue. It's unintelligent to agree on every single issue. But I think together, just having the right mindset, which says we want to elevate as many people as we can, no matter where they live, no matter their background, whether they voted for us or not. These are all of our constituents. And you're right, it's a joy to have an energetic, intelligent governor who is working every day on behalf of Marylanders. And it's been really, really great.
And both of you have empathy, which I think is a lot of what you're talking about. And when you start there, when you start with the idea of how can I help more people, you can get a lot done. All right, we like to close with some fun questions, or at least we like to think they're fun and or meaningful.
Okay.
I know you're a proud mom.
Definitely.
Tell me what you're most proud of.
Well, I have my daughter's name is Alexandra. I'm like every mother. She's 20, and I swear, I think she's the best to have ever done it. I'm just going to come out and say it. I think she's the best to have ever done it. And she is a deeply empathetic person. She is a very loving, and she's strong. She's decided that criminal justice reform is the issue that drives her. She's working, for example, on legislation to avoid solitary confinement for juveniles. And she is just a really lovely, she's hilarious. She loves to do thrifting. I guess a lot of these young ones are really into thrifting. And she's just a joy. She really is. So motherhood, I have to tell you, of all the desires that I had, motherhood was the number one desire, was to have the opportunity to to have a child that I could pour into and to raise to, to love God and to be a part of our community. And she is all of that and then some. So it's been so much fun. She's the most fun kid. And, we're very close and we have so much fun together. So it's just a real, and you know what? And I should just also say I'm blessed to also be a part of just a wonderful family. The two great and amazing parents. I have one sister. There are just two of us, and my family has grown exponentially every year, not by blood, but by love. I have so many people who we love to get together and barbecue, sit on the deck and talk, or just my family has now included even many of my colleagues. I have friends from high school and college, and just over the years have picked up more and more extended family. So I'm a really blessed person and just really do enjoy all the time I get to spend with my family.
As a fellow Southerner, you had me at barbecue. What do y'all like to barbecue?
Well, see, listen, and you said y'all. So you assumed, Andy, this is not fair. You didn't know that I'm the one who does the barbecuing.
Oh.
Did you? This?
Tell me what you do.
So I have this chicken that people come from near and far. They talk about this chicken, and I'm not going to tell you my secret to how I marinate it, but I do marinate it. There's something here in the DC, Maryland area that's called mambo sauce.
Okay.
You got to have a mambo sauce when you come this way. But I prepare the chicken with the marinade the night before. I do a little bit of preparation in the morning when I usually wake up. I do a little bit I cook it a bit, and then I put it on the grill. But I eat grilled food. I can eat it 7 days a week. I tell you, I really can. But I love grilled food, love barbecue, but just also love the camaraderie. And in Maryland, of course, you got to throw in a few crabs, have while you're there, which is another kind of activity. So it's just all about us coming together, and we do it at least once a month, twice a month. We do it as often as we can.
I normally ask someone about their secret superpower that people don't know about. For you, is it grilling?
You know what? The cooking is it. And you know what? I love dancing.
Okay.
Gotta confess to you. If the music comes on and, hey, listen, it's a form of self-expression, but I love joy. I just like having fun. And whether that's cooking and having friends over, dancing a little bit, or just talking, I really do enjoy people, most of all. That's been, my whole life, but I just like having a good time. I think life is to be enjoyed.
Senator, thank you so much for joining us on the Andy Bashir podcast. Keep up the good fight.
Thank you so much, Andy. You as well. Thank you.
You're listening to the Andy Bashir podcast. We talk about this podcast as a conversation among friends. And so our weekly segment is a conversation with two of my friends, John Rabinowitz and John McConnell. Gentlemen, are you ready for another week?
What a week we had last week. Plenty of topics I know, John, you are anxious to discuss.
Yeah, lots of topics we've got to go over today.
Well, let's start with following up from a conversation that we had on the U.S. bombing of Iran's nuclear sites. And I believe my comments, at least, were this is a big enough decision to where you're judged by history, not by people Monday morning quarterbacking in the moment. One of the things I think we all agreed on that you'll be judged on was it effective? And we also talked about, was it necessary? How close were they? And does it create a lasting peace? What are the implications to the safety and security of Americans? So what we've seen thus far are thankfully no terrorist attack on Americans. It looks like we did get a ceasefire in that part of the Middle East, at least as of when we are taping this show. But the new information that's come out is suggesting that maybe one and only one of those three separate sites that were bombed were effective, that they decimated or at least really impacted the target.
Well, and when you look at the attack, I think there were over 20 of those MOPs that were dropped there. And, the next day, 2 days after they come out, and all of a sudden you're announcing totally obliterated. They have no nuclear program. Then what does that look like when we have to come back out and the reality is that it's not?
So when I think about it, I'm looking at, is America safer for what happened? And you're right. We don't go back and look at Monday morning quarterback. I understand that 2 of the 3 sites, they could be up in months again, enriching nuclear material. But I still think it's a priority that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon.
I think we all agree that Iran cannot be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. One of the things, though, that concerns me that John mentioned is the administration over and over and over saying this was a complete obliteration of all 3 sites, which raises credibility questions to what else we're being told. But certainly, I think we do see that ceasefire, and we haven't seen some of the other concerns.
And I also wonder, I mean, does this mean that there's going to be more bombing, or is there going to be more diplomacy? I just don't know. Well, I guess wait and see.
I think that's what it is. We're getting a little more data for those questions about how time is going to judge a decision this big. I just reiterate, I think it's about was it necessary? How close were they to a nuclear weapon? Was it effective? And we've got a little more on that. What are the repercussions that come out of it? And then was there the legal authority? And again, I think the right nonpartisan way to go about it is to say, when you're the president and you make a big call, you're judged over time on all those questions.
Listen, the next thing that happened that we need to discuss happened on Friday when the House passed this rescission bill where it clawed back a little over $9 billion. I think originally it was going to be 9.4, and then there were concessions and ended up being $9 billion. But it really affects public broadcasting and foreign aid. I know that we want to avoid wasteful spending, but what are your thoughts on this bill?
I got a text from a great friend of ours whose kids come to our house, and he is most likely going to lose his job.
Once interviewed me on public radio.
That's correct. That's correct. So when you get that from someone, not just what you're reading about or there are these people, but it's actually a real person that and kids know you. I mean, it's hard to absorb.
I think it's concerning, especially in rural areas where rural radio, NPR, and others are one of the primary sources for news and what else is going to be out there. I also think as we continue to cut foreign aid, we lose part of our diplomacy. Now, part of what makes America safe is the way that we are viewed in the world, and certainly some of that foreign aid helps with that. But perhaps the biggest piece is the precedent that this sets. This was a bipartisan appropriation by the last Congress, and I'm not sure I've ever seen, or at least I don't remember ever seeing, another Congress coming back after a couple votes changed and pulling back an appropriation that had previously been agreed on. So is this Pandora's box? What does it open? And how can they negotiate now, especially close to a set of elections?
And usually Congress has the power of the purse, so it is a really interesting move. And I think, what was it, $8 billion of the $9 billion is the foreign aid, and like 1.1 is to public broadcasting. What does that do for like KET here in our state? Does the state come in and supplement the loss, or I guess they're already saying they're going to pull away from some shows?
So in Kentucky, the PBS affiliate has already canceled some coverage, including of a big political event. But it's going to be a real challenge when Republicans in Congress vote to cut this, whether Republicans in a state that is Republican controlled in the legislature would step in and add money, when typically what you see is them try to emulate or copy a lot of what's going on at the federal level.
Yep.
Well, Andy, you've had some travels down to South Carolina.
What a week for you.
Yeah, no joke.
You're going to do this to me on my own podcast.
100%.
Did you eat barbecue? We want to know, what was your favorite town? What did you do? What were you doing in South Carolina?
So I went down to South Carolina for 3 reasons. The South Carolina AFL-CIO and the National AFL-CIO asked me to come down for one of their big conventions. And then the Georgetown Democrats, and this is a group up close to Myrtle Beach, was having one of their big dinners. It's normally a Blue Sunday. They made it a Blue Thursday for me, which
there you go.
I appreciate. We sold out, and then we sold some more. And the last piece is my son, Will, who has been on this podcast a bunch, had a baseball tournament where they won.
Can we talk about that baseball tournament for a second? Can you give us your proud dad moment? I mean, You must have been in shock when that happened.
So this is yesterday from when we're filming this. Will hit a grand slam out of a Division One baseball field. It was a big, big moment in the actual video. You can hear all of us screaming hysterically.
And did you get the ball?
Uh, I didn't personally retrieve this ball, but someone did because
So it's coming home.
it went into a pond.
Oh,
And so it took commitment, but thankfully people love Will enough to go get it. But we had some great travels across South Carolina. I got to meet with faith leaders, did a reception in Greenville and a reception in Columbia, also one in Charleston, and just saw a bunch of Democrats, independents, and Republicans that were fired up. And as I've said on this podcast, my goal right now is to be a reasonable voice about common sense, common ground, and getting things done. And I think people especially appreciated a Southern Democrat being there talking about getting results.
you know, John, I consider you and myself pretty good friends of the governor, right?
I believe we are.
Now, when I think of Vogue magazine, do you think of Andy?
You think of fashion forward?
No one thinks of me when they think of Vogue until now.
I mean, what an article, man. That was awesome.
Well, it was a neat opportunity. You know, a kid that grew up in Kentucky that has been told he needs to up his fashion and numerous times. I still remember when I met my wife, I had the first suit I ever bought when I was 18 because it still fits. Thankfully, she's upped my game a little bit, but it was special. And then I will tell you, this was a reporter that really wanted to get to know me. And I appreciated that. Not just trying to have an angle on this or that, but just try to present something about us. I think he mainly liked Brittany. And somehow, it's the only time we've done photos where Winnie has turned around and smiled for the camera. Apparently, it took Vogue.
Look at that.
John, I'm still questioning the 7-day-a-week workout.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know.
Every day.
Every day.
What do you do?
You're listening to the Andy Bashir podcast. This segment is called In My Kentucky Accent. It's about what's on my heart and mind. Today, I want to talk about anger politics. Anger politics just ain't right. It's politics that tries to turn one person against another, that uses negative emotions like anger and hate to try to push one person ahead, but at whose expense? Anger politics, hurts this country. It creates an us versus a them. And it's the exact opposite of what we all pledged to, especially when we were little, and said that Pledge of Allegiance each day at the start of school. In that pledge, we pledged to a country and to a flag, not to one individual. And we pledged to keep this country indivisible. The idea is that we are Americans before we are ever Democrats, Republicans, or independents. And that means we put the welfare of this country and hopefully each other ahead of simply trying to get more R's and D's in this group or in that group. I believe that we have to end anger politics in our time, that we cannot leave it to our kids and grandkids because this country can't burn this hot any longer. What it means is that we've got to come back together. We've got to say no to cruelty and yes to humanity, that we've got to be willing to talk to each other about our why and accept that we can have some differences, but still be doing what we think is right. I believe in an America where we can lift each other up and never push someone else down. But that's going to take all of us, again, saying no to the use of anger and hate in our politics, or I tell you what, in any other part of our life. This week on the Andy Bashir podcast, we've got another segment called Ask Andy. Recorded this the other day. Let's see what you think. Starting out is John McConnell.
All right, Andy. What was one of your strongest influences?
My strongest influences. Well, certainly my dad has been a huge influence on my life as well as my mom. At this age, I'm actually thinking my brother had a little more influence on me than I want to tell him, but I guess the world now knows. But watching my dad in not just the offices he had, but in the human being that he is, how he helped out members of his family, investing in us as kids, a huge influence. Certainly, if you look at law, you think Thurgood Marshall. And when I became a lawyer, you look at everything that he did and won, and then how he served as a justice, and talk about just a hero. In politics, I got to grow up watching Bill Clinton, how he went about running for president, being president. Yes, he made a number of mistakes, but the way he tried to govern for as much of the country as possible, it was something that I certainly noticed.
After a hard day, what drives you to start that next day?
So there are a lot of hard days in this job, but it's your why that makes you jump out of bed the next morning, being willing to run into that brick wall again and again and again, because one day it's going to fall. I think about the fact that my General Assembly told me that they would never pass medical marijuana while I was governor. And here we had all these veterans suffering from PTSD. We had people being prescribed opioids for chronic pain when this could be a much better form of medication. Yet I got it done because each day my why says that there are people out there that need our help, that we need to lead with the golden rule that we love our neighbor as ourselves, and the parable of the Good Samaritan that says everyone's our neighbor, and the belief that we can do better, that we can be better. And in this chaotic world where a lot of people feel like they've lost control with all the crazy news that's out there, I get to get up and do something about it every day. And being the control freak that I am, that's helpful, but also it gives me a lot of purpose.
When you think back to the speeches you've given, the groups, whether adults, children, which one do you think stands out the most in your mind?
I love talking to students across Kentucky. The Governor's Scholars Program changed my life. That's a program that rising seniors can go to, where you're on a college campus for a period of time. It turned me from somewhat shy or not confident in myself, not feeling like I had value, into something totally different. Changed my life for the better, helped me become comfortable with who I am, told me that people liked me, which is really hard in high school. Now getting to go back, and I speak for about 10 minutes, and I take 50 minutes of questions. And admittedly, I have no idea what's coming. Normally, it's about life, but somebody asked me about KFC this last time.
Have you ever been starstruck?
I have. I don't get starstruck much, and it's a job where you get to meet, but hopefully get to know a lot of people. And what you find out is people are normal. They just have exciting jobs. But I met Michael Jordan once, and my goodness, Michael Jordan is, for my generation, the Muhammad Ali, is the icon. And I got to meet Ali once, but that was much later in his life. And Ali's widow, Lonnie, is one of the best human beings I've ever met. But Michael Jordan, I remember I was at Derby, and somebody says, "Hey, Michael Jordan's over there," and he's literally all the way across Churchill Downs. And I turn and I start to giggle. But you got to fast forward years later, and I'm at the Ryder Cup. It's that Ryder Cup in Louisville that was so exciting. The Americans won. But I'm walking along the course, and I walk up a set of stairs, and there's Michael Jordan. And he's wearing if you remember the old jean shorts that had the paint speckles on, they didn't catch on, but apparently MJ keeps the swag. And got to meet him there. I could hardly form a sentence because he's Michael Jordan.
As we end another episode of the Andy Bashir podcast, you have another reason to watch us on YouTube at Andy Bashir Podcast, because now we're closing out with 3 dudes all in white shirts, as John, and I wore almost the same thing for this episode. I'm going to tell you, it's not as good as that 4th of July episode, but still worth tuning in.
Listen, we all got the memo on the dress attire for today's show.
So what'd you think of today's episode?
You want to go,
John?
Listen, I thought it was awesome. The
story that the senator talked about with her great grandfather was so impactful. But I'll tell you the thing that stuck with me the most on this episode is when you were talking about the My Kentucky accent and anger politics. And we've talked about this. The three of us have talked about this. About I so strongly believe in putting people over parties and being issue driven. Friends on both sides of the aisle, and I really hate that you have to pick one side or the other, because really we're at the end of the day we're trying to help people.
We have 7 kids between us. And I think all of us desire to have that better world for them and recognize that we can't have people fighting every single day with willing to do anything, willing to even incite violence towards groups of people if they think it gets them ahead or one more seat.
Yep. One thing I enjoyed today was the comments we had. We were talking about Iran and the bombing, and how as soon as it came out, all the words were it's been completely destroyed. They have no nuclear capabilities. And I guess part of the question I have is that how long can you come out and say things that are just false until at some point people start to stop listening to what you say at first until the facts come out?
And credibility and authenticity. I think we saw some real authenticity from the senator today. Some questions on credibility, certainly, for that.
For sure. He is quite a showman.
He is quite a showman.
This has been another episode of the Andy Bashir podcast. Remember, you can only see the embarrassing fact that we're wearing the same thing on YouTube at Andy Bashir Podcast. You can download us on every major platform. Y'all enjoy. See you next week. Remember, you can download us on all major platforms or subscribe to our YouTube channel at Andy Bashir Podcast. Your downloads and your subscriptions are what keep us going and keeps this conversation going. So make sure you're a part of it, and let's do this together.